So y'all would like ours as well. We can put that in the chat.
All right, good morning, everyone. Do we have everyone here that we need to get started?
Your Honor, I believe my co-counsel is trying to be let in the room. She should be Attorney Collins.
It'll be saying my name.
Excuse me, Jonah Bernard. I'm not 100. There we go. She's in. Thank you.
Okay, normally in a trial, we would rise at certain times during the proceedings out of respect for the court and the jury. However, in a virtual trial, we will not be doing that. So everyone is to remain seated and to stay in their camera view during the proceedings. If we have all the witnesses, I would like to swear in all the witnesses at this time. So if you could please turn on your videos and raise your right hand. Okay, do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and the rules of the mock trial competition? And you'll need to unmute yourself so I can hear you say yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. And as you heard, with Zoom, if we have too many people speaking at once, that can distort the audio. So we want to make sure that if you are not actively speaking, that you do mute yourself. According to the rules, I need to be unmuted during the competition, but everyone else should be on mute unless they are speaking. So a few reminders on the logistics. There's no communication allowed between the competing team members and others in the Zoom courtroom until the trial is concluded. Only people associated with the participating teams and officials associated with hosting are permitted in the Zoom courtroom. Please make sure you're not wearing anything that could associate you with your school or team name, and make sure that there is nothing in your backgrounds that could do the same. Confirm, who are my timekeepers?
We have a timekeeper today. He should be off camera somewhere. So
I just need to confirm that he's here. Okay,
there
thank
we go.
you. And I believe we have agreed that the timekeeping will be done via chat. So each timekeeper should post the time announcements through the chat for everyone to see. And we need to make sure that we're only using one electronic device. If we have multiple devices going, that can cause some feedback. So make sure that if you have any cell phones or additional laptops, iPods, anything like that, that they're in silent mode. Please do not answer any phone calls or text messages during the trial, or use any other electronic device during this round. And is anyone wanting this to be recorded?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. So now that we've gotten our logistics out of the way, we're going to go ahead and get started. Let's call the case of the state of Texoma versus Sylvestris Diari. My name is May Carter. I will be the presiding judge today. The scoring judges are here as well. You heard their names. That would be Tracy Harding, Ms. Beth Fagan, and Haley Hebron. They will all be here, but they will not be on camera. Please look at the buttons to the lower left of your screen. Turn off your audio and video if you're not to be on camera, and they should be remained off until the trial ends. Everyone should also have video set to hide all non-video participants. This means that only the people on the screen should be me and the advocates. So you should be only seeing people who have their video on. And can the attorneys please make their appearances for the pretrial matters?
Yes, Your Honor. May the defense team make appearances?
Yes,
Yes, Your Honor, the prosecution would also like to do introductions.
okay. Let's start with the prosecution.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. My name is Ella Levens, and today my co-counsel off-screen will be Catherine Collins and Sabina Wetterling. May our witnesses introduce themselves?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Good day, Your Honor. My name is Kyra Hong, and today I will be portraying the witness, the personal assistant, Cyril Rada. Off screen today will be my fellow witnesses, Georgia Pello as Detective Sandaleo and Jonah Bernard as the filmmaker Pardalis Jacobitis.
Thank you.
May the defense team now make introductions?
Yes, please.
My name is Paige Estrie, and I represent the defendant, Sylvester Stiardi.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Reese Donnelly, and I represent the defendant, Sylvester Stiardi.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Liam Blank, and I represent the defendant, Sylvester Stiardi.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Claire Baxter, and I will be portraying Chouse Namir.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Katie Harris, and I'm portraying Kit Manol.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Avery Avila Dixon, and I will be portraying Sylvester Stiardi.
Thank you. And before we begin with the pretrial, have there been any changes to your team rosters or role assignments as they were presented to the court?
No, Your Honor.
We will now hear the opening statements from each party. Everyone should make sure that they are in speaker view. That is the button in the upper right of your screen. Any attorneys, please remember to mute your audio when the other attorney is speaking.
Your Honor, before we proceed to opening statements, may we conduct some brief pretrial housekeeping?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, can we confirm that you, the jury, and all authorized observers of today's trial have the pre-approved, pre-printed documents to which they can quickly refer when requested?
Yes.
Thank you. We would also like to pre-admit exhibits 1, 2, and 8, which have been stipulated as admissible by both parties in 7, 8, and 9, and stipulation 7, 8, and 9.
Are there any objections?
Your Honor, I would ask that during the trial, both teams would go through the proper predicate to entering the exhibits, even though they are stipulated. I would ask that we still go through the questions to enter them. Your
Honor, since these are admissible, we would request that to save time, we can pre-admit these.
I will pre-admit the agreed exhibits. All other exhibits will need the proper predicate.
Thank you, Your Honor. Also, our team will be sharing computers, a provision allowed by the rules of virtual mock trial. We will need to change screen names at times and would like to designate those times as non-competitive time if permitted.
I will allow it.
Thank you. Further, we would like the court to take judicial notice that per stipulation 6 and 10, as of May 18th, 2020, the victim, Barry Bazar, is determined to be presumed dead by a Texoma probate court and the U.S. Coast Guard.
Any objection to the judicial notice?
No objections, Your Honor.
And
notice is taken.
Finally, we would like the court to take judicial notice that the will of the deceased is not in the case materials and cannot be presented as an exhibit today.
So noted.
Thank you. And with that, the state is ready to proceed.
Your Honor, the defense just has a few more housekeeping matters to attend to.
Go ahead.
May we assume that all exhibits have been pre-marked?
Yes.
And may we assume per mock trial competition rules for this year that exhibits cannot be shared on screen?
Yes.
And if we have an objection and need to approach the bench, may we constructively approach?
I would prefer that you raise your hand so that I can acknowledge you. I need to see you. And yes, that is acceptable.
Yes, Your Honor. And per stipulation 6, the defense would like to call the court's attention to the fact that knowledge of the will's beneficiaries is undisputed.
So noted.
And with that,
if they are calling judicial notice, we would like the court to, you know what? Never mind. We accept that as conclusive.
yes, Your Honor. And with that, the defense would just like to be allowed the same privileges as the prosecution.
Yes.
And the defense has no more housekeeping matters, Your Honor. The defense is ready for trial.
And the prosecution, are you ready for opening statements?
Yes, Your Honor. May we proceed?
You may proceed.
May it please the court, opposing counsel, members of the jury. Some gamble with money, some gamble with life, but Sylvestris Diardi did both, and we lost. The defendant Sylvestris Diardi, fueled by the adrenaline of risky behavior, motivated by greed and gambling debt, carefully carried out a plot to murder Mr. Barry Bizarre. Today, I, along with my co-counsel, will represent you, the people of Texoma, and our laws. Together, we have an obligation to ensure that the breaking of those laws comes with consequences. The evidence today will show one thing. Sylvestris Diardi murdered Barry Bizarre in a premeditated act, complete with a meticulous plan to destroy the evidence, including Mr. Bizarre's body, and to clean the scene of the crime. Specifically and gruesomely, Mr. Diardi killed Barry Bizarre, fed his body to the Y-Cat, ran his remains through the meat grinder, then methodically cleaned the Y-Cat's cage in the meat processing room with bleach. But the best laid schemes of Sylvestris Diardi forgot to take into account the watchful eyes of the people at the Big Cat Temple who loved Barry. You will hear from 6 witnesses today. They will tell you of Diardi's gambling debts, and they will tell you how often Mr. Bizarre changed his will and what they believe inheriting Mr. Bizarre's estate would mean for the beneficiary. And every single one of them will provide evidence to show you that Barry Bizarre didn't just decide to sail off into a storm. Oh no, he was murdered. First, you'll hear from Detective Sundalio. She's going to tell you about the forensic evidence that led to her arrest of Mr. Diardi. Evidence showing that Diardi brutally murdered Mr. Bizarre in a tiger cage. Next, you will hear from Serval Arata, Mr. Bizarre's personal assistant, who will tell you about what she saw that night when Mr. Bizarre disappeared and about the assets that Mr. Bizarre owned. She'll tell you how unusual it was for Mr. Bizarre to leave on his boat without telling her. Finally, we will call Pardalis Jacobitis to the stand. We'll tell you about Diardi's suspicious behavior near the time of Mr. Bizarre's disappearance. The defense will call their own set of witnesses today. They will try to offer alternative possibilities as to what happened to Mr. Bizarre. They may say he left of his own accord or that someone else murdered him, but listen carefully. You will see all other theories are impossible. They will call the sanctuary's handyman, Kit Manuel, who will tell you that on the night that Mr. Bizarre disappeared, the meat processing room, which could have been used to dispose of a human body, was used, even though there was no meat at the Big Cat Temple. Charleston Meyer, the boat keeper, will tell you that whoever left on Barry's boat did not follow any of Barry's habits that usually preceded an unscheduled trip. Mr. Nemar will also tell you that Diardi knew how to sail Barry's boat. They will also call Sylvestris Diardi to the stand. You'll hear denials of the crime and claims that he was on a run that night, but you'll also hear about his gambling debt. You'll hear about the errands that he sent Big Cat Temple employees on. They were errands that could have been run any night, but were delayed to the only night that Mr. Bizarre and Diardi would be alone. You will not see anyone confirm Diardi's location that night. And when you add it all up, you will see that Diardi is the murderer. Barry was an icon for animal rights. He always gave everyone a second chance. But Diardi cruelly ended his life. There's no way to bring back Barry, but you can bring justice. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, after you hear all of the testimony and evidence today, you will see the only reasonable conclusion, the only just conclusion, will be to find Sylvestris Diardi guilty of murdering Barry Bizarre. Thank you.
Your Honor, permission to proceed with the defense opening?
Yes, please.
May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. What really happened to Barry Bizarre? The prosecution has just told you a wild story about gambling with lives and money. But as we will show you today, their case is completely circumstantial. The evidence has been manipulated to fit their story. The prosecution would like you to believe their version, that Sylvestris Diardi murdered Barry Bizarre. But this is a case about incompetence and jumping to conclusions, not real evidence. We will show you that on April 30th, it is more likely that Barry Bizarre decided to sail off on one of his spontaneous trips and got caught in a typhoon, then our client killed him. We will show you that on April 30th, it is more likely that Sir Lorada had the motive to murder Barry Bizarre, not Sylvester Stiardi. But really, we can't know what happened because members of the jury, there is no body. Their case theory is mere fiction. It reads more like a Netflix movie than what really happened. My name is Reese Donnelly, and along with my co-counsels, Paige Austion and Liam Blank, we represent the defendant, Sylvester Stiardi. The prosecution bears the burden of proof today, which means that they need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Sylvester Stiardi intentionally or knowingly caused the death of Barry Bizarre. And if they fail to meet that burden, you must find Sylvester Stiardi not guilty. Beyond a reasonable doubt means that they must prove the charge of murder in this case with evidence so convincing that you would be willing to rely on it without hesitation. This is the highest burden of proof in the legal system. But they will not be able to meet that burden today because we will show you what the prosecution doesn't want you to think about, that their case is completely circumstantial. It is based off the testimony of an incompetent detective who failed to collect evidence, a nosy filmmaker who cares more about drama than truth, and a personal assistant who wanted revenge for being cut out of Barry Bizarre's will. Now, as the defense, we don't have to call any witnesses, but we will call 3 to show that Sylvester Stiardi did not murder Barry Bizarre. First, you will hear from Austion, an ex-Marine who works at the Texoma Marina, who will tell you that Barry Bizarre's boat went out the night of April 30th and the typhoon's course changed unexpectedly. Barry's boat's path was headed straight for the typhoon and his boat was never found. Ms. Namir will also explain that just a week before Mr. Bizarre's disappearance, Sir Lorada was obsessed with Barry and inheriting the sanctuary. Next, you hear from Kit Manuel, who will tell you that Sylvester Stiardi had no reason to kill Mr. Bizarre. The two had a very close relationship after she saved Mr. Bizarre from a tiger attack. Ms. Manuel will also testify that she cleans the tiger cages, not Ms. Stiardi, and that when she returned to the sanctuary on April 30th, the meat processing room looked and smelled like it had been used. And lastly, you will hear from the defendant herself, Ms. Sylvester Stiardi, who will tell you about the close relationship she had with Mr. Bizarre and how he trusted her with supervising important tasks at the sanctuary. She will testify that she went on a run the night of April 30th, like she usually does, and that Barry frequently took out his boat without always informing others. She had saved Barry's life once before, and there is no way she would ever want to kill him. And she will also testify that Sir Lorada hated her after Barry Bizarre changed his will to make Miss Stiardi the beneficiary instead of Miss Lorada. Members of the jury, what really happened to Barry Bizarre? Without a body, can we really know beyond a reasonable doubt? We are confident that after reviewing all the evidence today, you will find our client, Sylvester Stiardi, not guilty of murder. Thank you.
Before the state calls its first witness, I will ask everyone to switch to the gallery view. That button is in the upper right of your screen. This will allow you to see the attorneys and the witnesses at the same time. You may proceed.
The state calls Detective Sunday Leo to the stand. May I proceed?
Yes.
Hello, Detective Leo. Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hello, my name is Sunday Leo. I'm a detective with the Major Crimes Unit of the Texoma Police Department.
And where did you receive training?
I started my career as a police officer and did that for about 10 years after the academy. During that time, I was apprenticed under some extremely skilled detectives. I've been a detective now for 2 years, starting in the narcotics unit before being promoted to the Major Crimes Unit.
And what does the Major Crimes Unit specialize in?
Detectives like myself investigate violent crimes, including murder. We gather information, both physical and circumstantial evidence.
And how do you come to your expert conclusions?
I gather information from my interviews so that way we can have their knowledge, and from we gather from physical and circumstantial evidence.
And do you use this evidence to make reasonable conclusions?
Yes.
And will your testimony today help the jury come to understand the evidence in today's case?
Yes, I will share specialized knowledge from my training and experience that the jurors likely do not possess. I will help them understand how the data from my findings can help them come to their own reasonable conclusions regarding the facts of this crime.
Your Honor, per mock trial rules, the prosecution will now use this foundation for the witness to present expert conclusions.
Now proceed.
Now, Detective, did this particular case originate as a murder investigation?
No, it did not. However, it is not uncommon for cases to evolve as details emerge. In fact, it actually started as a fire investigation.
Interesting. And how did it evolve?
While I was monitoring the fire department's investigation, witnesses on scene began implicating the famous owner Barry Bizarre as a victim somehow, and they were also concerned that the fire was not an accident.
Which witness stated this concern?
Actually, there were two, Serval Rada and Pardalis Jacobaitis. When I asked,
Your Honor, I'm objecting to hearsay. She's testifying to specific statements given out of court.
May I respond?
Yes.
This witness is testifying about the effect it had on her when she asked about the fire, and not the matter asserted regarding the murder.
I'll allow it. Objection overruled. You may
Please
continue.
finish your answer.
well, when I asked if Mr. Bizarre had started the fire, Pardalis Jacobaitis instead began implying that Sylvestris Diardi may have killed Bizarre and burned down part of Big Cat Temple to destroy evidence.
How did you respond to these allegations?
Well, I informed the fire department that there was a missing person and to look closely into the origins of the fire. This gave me time to investigate further on the allegations that were made.
And how did you proceed to investigate further?
Well, I documented the initial allegations made by the filmmaker Jacobaitis, and then interviewed the personal assistant Serval Rada to see if there were any correlations as to who was implicated in the new murder accusation.
And who did they both seem concerned about?
Sylvestris Diardi.
How did you proceed at this point?
I now had two witnesses giving identical accounts in separate interviews. After interrogating all others working and living on or nearby the Big Cat Temple, a motive and a sequence began to emerge.
And how did you begin to gather evidence for Mr. Bizarre's alleged murder?
Well, nothing remarkable was on the surveillance cameras covering most of the Big Cat Temple. So I ordered a forensic examination to look over the area where the cameras happened to be malfunctioning.
Did you use a laboratory to generate this forensics report?
Yes, ma'am.
And will the results of the report help the jury come to understand your specialized knowledge of murder investigation?
Yes, ma'am, I believe so, if they believe in science, of course.
Now, did the forensics report yield anything important to your investigation?
Yes, as you can see, the lab had two key findings. One, the fingerprints proved that Diardi was in the burn shed prior to the fire. But more importantly, two, the DNA.
Objection, Your Honor. I'm objecting to facts, not an evidence, because they're referencing an exhibit that has not been entered.
May I respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 703 and an expert witness, the probative value of this document outweighs any other concerns.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
Because this is an exhibit, they still must enter it before testifying to the specifics of it. So despite that rule, because it's an exhibit, it must be entered.
May I respond?
Go ahead.
Your Honor, if the court wants to take the time, I'm happy to enter this as a business document.
Lay your predicate and enter your exhibit before referencing it, please.
Yes, Your Honor. May I have the witness in court refer to what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 4?
Yes.
Let me know when both opposing counsel and the witness have it in front of them.
I have it in front of me.
All right. Do you recognize this, Detective Leo?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you identify it, please?
Yes, this is the forensic lab report that I ordered.
Has it been modified?
No, ma'am.
Is it an accurate depiction?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this the type of report the lab normally uses when making their analyses?
Yes, ma'am. They always use this.
And did they use standardized procedures to make these analyses?
Yes, ma'am.
Has this report been in your custody?
Yes, it was sent directly to me and has been in my possession ever since.
Is there any reason to believe there is anything untrustworthy about this document?
No, ma'am.
And would entering this document into evidence help the jury understand the nature of your specialized knowledge of murder investigation?
Yes, ma'am, I do believe so.
Your Honor, with this foundation, I offer Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
So entered.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Now, Detective Leo, did the forensics report yield anything important to your investigation?
Yes, as you can see, it did have two key findings. One, the fingerprints proved that Diardi was in the burned shed prior to the fire. But more importantly, two, the DNA of both the defendant Sylvestris Diardi and the victim Barry Bazar are in blood evidence found to be in the location determined to be where the murder took place.
And where was that?
The DNA was found in one of the cages of the largest wildcats at Big Cat Temple. It is my expert conclusion that the murder, or at least the initial attack, took place there in order to conceal evidence and manufacture plausible deniability.
After the forensics lab indicated the presence of human DNA, what did you do?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
After the forensics lab indicated the presence of human DNA, what did you do? Can you hear me?
I can't. If something is blocking out, I don't. Oh, sorry, this was off. Yeah, it's just. Okay. Sorry, I'm sorry. Continue.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
May I repeat my question?
Yes, please.
After the forensics lab indicated the presence of human DNA, what did you do?
Well, see, while a blood trail can lead you to the scene of a crime, a money trail can lead you to a murderer. From my interviews, it was well known that the victim, Barry Bazar, had recently bequeathed his entire estate to one beneficiary. So I focused my investigation on that person, Sylvestris Diardi, and checked all alibis of everyone else connected.
So now you have the testimony of several witnesses and the results of the forensics lab. And what were you able to determine?
I was able to determine that everyone had viable alibis except Diardi. All Diardi had are what we consider false flags.
False flags?
Often in cases like these, a murderer will try to outsmart an investigation by devising false fragments of an alibi. These consider one, like time stamping, like sending an innocent-looking text message during the time of a crime. Or two, location placement, like saying hello to a neighbor in a familiar setting. Or three, committing the crime during a solo routine, which others would believe as regular routine, like running alone. After recognizing these false flags, it was apparent that Mr. Bazar's murder was premeditated.
So it was planned in advance?
Yes.
Did you recognize any other premeditation to this murder?
Your Honor, I'm objecting to Rule 704B, improper opinion, or she just can't testify to the mindset of Ms. Diardi, because in Rule 704B, even an expert cannot testify to her mindset. So if it's premeditated or what she thought about it, that just cannot be testified to.
May I
Sustained.
respond?
Go ahead.
Now, Detective Leo, you had several allegations that there was a murder and you recognized different pieces of evidence, but have you recovered the victim's body?
No, but this made it a very important part of my investigation. Sometimes the absence of a body indicates a highly devised plan of murder and concealment.
Did you search for a body even so?
Yes, regardless of those, we did search for Barry Bazar.
In what ways?
Not only did I personally search, along with the Texoma Police Department, the area of Big Cat Temple, but I even called in the U.S. Coast Guard to search for Barry Bizarre and his boat near the Roy and Singfring Islands, but they were unable to find either one after searching for 2 weeks.
And what was the Coast Guard's conclusion in their search?
On May 18th, 2020, the Coast Guard declared Barry Bizarre missing and presumably dead and ended their search for any survivor.
As a professional investigator, Detective Leo, what is your highest priority?
My highest priority is to ascertain the truth so that the justice can be served even if the dots aren't clearly connected.
Thank you, Your Honor. We pass the witness.
Your Honor, permission to proceed with cross-examination?
Yes, granted.
Good morning, Detective Leo. I'd like to ask you some questions about your investigation of Barry Bizarre's disappearance. So you arrived at the Big Cat Temple to investigate a fire, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Your Honor, permission to instruct the witness to turn to Exhibit 5?
Granted.
Can you identify this exhibit?
I was not involved in this. I don't know what this exactly is. I know it is a 911 call, but I was not a part of this.
But as a detective, you work with the 911 dispatch office?
Yes, I have worked in there. Yes.
And did this call begin the legally authorized investigation of the murder of Barry Bizarre?
I believe this was about the fire regarding the burn shed.
But it did begin the legally authorized investigation?
Yes.
And is this a true and correct copy of the 911 call?
I believe so. Again, I was not there when it was made, so.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
Not that I know of.
Your Honor, the defense offers Exhibit 5 into evidence as a public record.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
So admitted.
So Kip Manul was the one that made this phone call, correct?
Yes, I believe so. From my interviews, I found that out.
And there was a fire in Mr. Cotis' shed?
Yes.
And you investigated the burnt out remains of this shed?
Yes, we did search through the remains.
And you discovered that the smoke detectors had been disconnected?
Yes, we did discover that.
But you don't know how they were disconnected?
No, that's what we were investigating until we found about the murder accusation, and then we investigated that.
Going back to my question, you don't know how they were disconnected?
Oh, no, ma'am, we do not.
And you found Miss Diardi's fingerprints on the smoke detector?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
But you were unable to date those fingerprints?
We were unable to date them, yes, but we were able to identify her fingerprints.
But it's true that fingerprints can be detectable up to 40 years after deposition?
Yes, that is also true.
So you don't know when Miss Diardi last touched the smoke detectors?
I don't know exactly when she touched them, yes.
And you're not an arson expert, correct?
I am not an expert in arson, no.
But there was an arson investigator assigned to review the evidence in this fire?
Yes, ma'am, that is true.
And this arson investigator did not charge anyone with arson?
No, they didn't charge, but it is my professional opinion as a murder investigation that it was arson.
So that's a yes. The arson investigator did not charge anyone with arson?
No, ma'am, they did not.
So you don't really know how the fire happened, do you?
We don't know exactly how it started, but in my conclusions, I have stated that I've stated my opinion.
And you also investigated the Y-Cat cage, correct?
Yes, that is true.
But there was no video of what happened inside the cage that night?
Yes, the cameras happened to be malfunctioning.
Right, so you could not see what happened inside the cage that night?
No, ma'am, that's why I ordered the forensic examination.
Right, and this forensic examination found traces of blood from Miss Diardi and Mr. Bizarre?
Yes, that is true.
But the forensic team was also unable to date these dried blood samples?
We were unable to date them, yes, but we were able to determine that they are DNA of both the defendant and the victim.
And they were found 6 to 8 feet high on the walls of the cage?
Yes, ma'am, that is true.
So you don't know when these blood samples got there.
I wasn't there, so no, I don't know exactly when they got there.
And you also found leftover bones in the YCAT cage, right?
Yes.
And these were recent bones,
They seem to be, yes.
but you did not bother to check them for any human DNA?
From looking at them, they did not look like human bones. They looked like animal bones.
Right, but that's a yes. You did not bother to check the bones found in the YCAT cage?
No, ma'am, I did not.
And you also had the forensics team swab the meat cutting and grinding machines, right?
We did, yes.
But they did not find any human DNA on those either?
They were unable to find human DNA in the grinders, but they were able to in the YCAT cage.
So other than the traces of blood found in the YCAT cage, there was no other human DNA recovered at the sanctuary?
In the areas that we searched, no.
So you have no evidence that Mr. Bazar was killed by the YCAT?
We have steps that followed to an accusation that led into investigation on the murder.
But redirecting you back to my question, you have no evidence that Mr. Bazar was killed by the YCAT?
We do not have any physical evidence, but circumstantial, yes.
And you also went to Snoopy's pub to confirm Ms. Arata's alibi?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
But no one could remember seeing her at the pub the night of April 30th.
They were sure that they had, but they weren't positive.
But for the night of April 30th, no one can confirm Ms. Arata was there?
Objection calls for hearsay. Opposing counsel is asking the witness to testify evidence gathered through a conversation, which is hearsay.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
I just asked her if she confirmed if Ms. Arata was at the pub, and she can do that by just, they're allowed to use evidence in interviews to, or an expert is, in order to go to her conclusion.
Sustain, but keep the questioning directly to the investigation.
Yes, Your Honor. So you cannot confirm when Ms. Arata left the pub the night of April 30th?
No, I could not confirm when she left.
And even considering Ms. Arata's motive and lack of alibi, you still did not consider her a possible suspect?
I did check her alibi of when she went to the We Spy Am store. She had a receipt, so I knew she was gone from the Big Cat Temple.
But after that, you don't know where she was?
Like I said, I talked to the people at the pub and they said they were pretty sure but weren't positive. And she was gone longer at the We Spy Am store.
Let's talk about Mr. Bazar's boat. The Coast Guard searched for Mr. Bazar and his boat?
Yes, that is true.
And they searched for 2 weeks?
Yes.
But they never found Mr. Bazar's boat?
They were unable to find his body or his boat.
And the Coast Guard offered to perform a wider search?
They offered it, but there were no signs of anything, so we called off the investigation.
Right, so you declined and the search was called off?
Yes, because we could not find anything.
And there was a dinghy on the boat, correct?
A what?
A dinghy?
A dinghy, from what I heard, it was disconnected.
But it was on the boat?
I'm not sure if it was on the boat or if it was off the boat because it was disconnected.
But you could have searched for it and you waited to search for it for 3 weeks?
Since the ding was disconnected, we could not search for anything because we couldn't determine where it was.
But after 3 weeks, you did search for it?
We tried, yes.
And you only did that because you were hounded by Ms. Diardi's attorneys?
Yes, we wanted to make sure, and that is our job, so we did search further.
So after 2 weeks of your investigating, you arrested Ms. Diardi for the murder of Barry Bazar?
Yes, from the circumstantial evidence that I gathered.
And you claim that Ms. Diardi either knocked him in a cage with a YCAT or ground his body up in the meat processing machine?
Yes, that was what I was able to determine.
But you don't know which of those happened?
We knew it had to be narrowed to those two because of the evidence and circumstantial evidence that we found.
And you also claim that she was either put in a boat or ground the rest of her body in the machine.
We came to the conclusion that she was sent off into the typhoon. She sent Barry off in the typhoon.
But you don't know which of these things happened.
We don't know exactly what happened, but it's my expert conclusion that Barry was sent into the typhoon.
But you can't be certain that a crime has even been committed.
From my expert conclusion, I believe a crime has been committed.
But you couldn't be certain.
Certain for facts, from the facts that I gathered, it seems to be so, but that's all I have.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Can you redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Detective Leo, opposing counsel has tried to indicate that your investigation was inconclusive in determining the source of the fire and even determining if a crime had been committed. What is your response to that?
Well, in an investigation, you can't be critical in every piece of evidence. Part of my job is noticing dead ends so I can move forward in the evidence needed for the grand jury to make its choice.
And what is the confidence level of the forensics fingerprint matching?
The confidence level for the fingerprints matching are 91%, which is completely compelling given which the standardized procedures that the forensic lab uses to make sure the fingerprints are accurate.
And in case the jury has been confused by the defense's questions, can you clarify to the jury your expert conclusions?
Yes, ma'am. My expert conclusion is that Sylvester Stiardi killed Barry Bizarre at Big Cat Temple and destroyed his body inside the typhoon in order to inherit the assets of his will.
Thank you, Your Honor. We pass the witness.
Are we done with this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Prosecution may call their next witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution calls Serval Arata to the stand. Turn your camera off. Give her, there we go. May I proceed?
Yes, please.
Excuse me, I didn't hear you. Can you repeat what you said?
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hello, Ms. Arata. Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Good day, everyone. My name is Serval Arata, and I am 28 years old.
What do you do for a living?
Well, I worked at the Big Cat Temple Sanctuary for about 6 years as a personal assistant to the famous Barry Bizarre. I was in charge of keeping up with Barry's records and schedule, handling administrative tasks for our front of house operations, and I also managed all of Barry's important paperwork.
And how do you know the deceased, Barry Bizarre?
Well, Barry hired me 6 years ago, and I wouldn't even call our relationship just boss and employee. He was like the only family I had after my parents died 3 years ago. I was even in his will for quite a while.
And how do you know Miss Diardi?
Diardi worked at the sanctuary. The two of them got really close after Diardi saved Barry from an untrained cat, which led Barry to believe that they were both reincarnated cats. That's also when Barry made Diardi the main beneficiary in his will.
What was your understanding of Mr. Bizarre's will?
I know Barry changed his will several times over the years, and before his most recent switch, I was the sole beneficiary. In his last switch back in September 2019, he put down Sylvester Stiardi as the main beneficiary and me as second. But after a couple arguments with Diardi, I'm pretty sure that he was about to put me back as the main beneficiary.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. This witness is referencing an out-of-court statement made by Barry Bizarre.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
No statement has been made or even referenced, so therefore it cannot be used to prove the truth of the matter asserted.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
I would argue they are asserting that there's argument that argument led her to believe that she was going to become the new beneficiary, and so I believe that is a truth being asserted.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Briefly.
First of all, this witness has said that she believed she was about to be the main beneficiary, which is this statement is being used for the effect on the listener. Furthermore, we are about to go into this statement more, and you will see it is actually an exception to hearsay.
Overruled, you may continue.
Now, Ms. Arata, what were they arguing about?
Well, Barry was yelling at Diardi and said he was going to remove him from the will.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. This witness is referencing an out-of-court statement being asserted for the truth of the matter.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
This is an exception to hearsay as it is a then existing mental condition, more specifically, a motive, plan, or intent.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
I do not believe that this statement is showing a then existing mental state.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Briefly.
Mr. Bazar saying that he planned on moving Diardi from his will was a plan, and therefore falls under this exception.
I'm going to sustain the objection. Please limit your questions to directly what the witness actually witnessed, not what they've heard.
This witness did witness this argument.
Please continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Arata, did you ever see any other animosity between Diardi and Mr. Bazar?
Well, I did see a tape, one of PJ's, where Sylvestris was saying, wouldn't it be perfect karma if Cat ate Barry? I was very upset after watching that tape.
Do you know what assets the deceased owned?
Yes, he had the entire estate of the Big Cat Temple. So the land, the Cat's Ironic, which is Barry's boat, the tigers, gift shop, machinery, equipment, you name it. Anything on the sanctuary property was his.
Now, can you tell us about Mr. Bazar's boat?
Barry loved that boat. He would use it to go sailing all the time. Marine, the guy who runs the marina, always kept his boat in the best sailing condition.
How often did Mr. Bazar go sailing?
Pretty often. He would just decide he wanted to go and then leave.
How long would he be gone?
Well, it varied, but anywhere between 3 days to a week at most.
And how often did he let you know where he was going before he left?
He would usually always call or let us know before he left, and the few times he went sailing unannounced, he would call me or Maureen to check on the cats while he was gone.
Let's talk about those cats. What was his relationship with them like?
Nothing else in this world mattered more to him. He was always making sure that they were being well taken care of, and he had such a close bond with all of the big cats, but his relationship with the white cat was something special.
Who was the white cat?
Well, white cat or wife cat was a white tiger Barry believed was his reincarnated wife. Barry would sometimes sit and talk to White Cat for hours on end, and it seemed to really comfort him.
Now, when was the last time that you saw Mr. Bazar?
I last saw Barry before I left the sanctuary to run some errands on the evening of April 30th. When I returned from those errands, Barry and his boat, the Cat's Ironic, were nowhere to be seen.
Now, back up a little bit. What happened that morning?
That morning was our last all-employee breakfast. Diardi told us that she had wanted us to all make some supply runs that night.
What were you supposed to do?
I was supposed to purchase some cameras from the Wiesbeimster in Melissa, which is about an hour and a half away. Diardi said that she had called our local store and they didn't have what we needed, which I found a bit odd.
Your Honor, hearsay. This witness is referencing what the store owner said.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
The witness did not reference what the store owner said. She said Diardi told her this, and anything Diardi says is an opposing party statement, and therefore not hearsay.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
Even if the party opponent is referencing it, if she referenced something else that another party says, that is still hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Furthermore, this is being used for the effect on the listener, explaining why Ms. Arata was planning on going to the further store.
Overrule the objection. You may continue.
Did you finish your answer, Ms. Arata?
Oh, well, as I was saying, the employees said that they didn't have what we needed, which I found a bit odd because we'd never had problems with our local store before.
And what did everyone else do?
Diardi also sent Kit Manuel and a part-time employee, Bob something, off to get some meat from a meat processing plant that was shutting down. Dallas and his film crew also left to go out for drinks, which was usual on Thursday nights.
Was anyone else at the Big Cat Temple that night?
Kip and Bob left at 6:30, Dallas and his crew left at 7, and I left at 7:30 after getting some filing done. When I left, the only ones I could still see at the sanctuary were Diardi and Barry.
And did you go on your errand?
Yes, I did.
Did you get what you needed?
I did, but as I was on my way to the Wiesbaum store in Melissa, I thought I'd stop by our local one just in case, and they ended up having what we needed. The employee seemed pretty confused that I had initially been sent to the further store.
When did you get back to the Big Cat Temple?
I got back a little late because I decided to use my extra time to stop by Snoopy's pub. I got back around 11 p.m.
When you got back, what did you do?
When I got back, I took a quick walk around the sanctuary to make sure everything was all right, and I found the white cat cage appeared to be freshly cleaned with a strong scent of bleach coming off of it.
Did you notice anything else?
I also noticed that Barry's boat was missing from the dock and originally assumed that he went on a nighttime sail, which he did from time to time. When I got back to my cabin, I saw through my window, the one facing south, Diardi, dripping wet, looking like she was coming back from the marina.
And when did you first start worrying about Mr. Bizarre?
Well, let's see. Barry's disappearance was suspicious early on. Barry either told someone before he left sailing or called as soon as possible. Most of the time
Your Honor, speculation. This witness cannot testify as to what Barry always did, whether he called someone else, as she can only testify as to what occurred in relations to herself.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, please.
I believe this witness was saying that Barry always called her.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
This witness actually said Barry always called someone. So that would be referencing someone else, and she would not have personal knowledge of that.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
This is still reasonably based on her perception, and this is not speculatory for her to say this.
I'll allow it. I overrule the objection. Please continue with your testimony.
And did you do anything to look into Mr. Bizarre's disappearance?
I wanted to call the police when Barry had been gone and been radio silent for 2 days because it was just out of character for him, out of the ordinary to not call or say anything. I believe that the police could determine whether or not Barry had left on his boat and if he had organized a Coast Guard search.
And based on your knowledge, who was at the Big Cat Temple between 7:30 and 11, the night of April 30th?
Diardi and Barry were the only ones there.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. This witness cannot testify as to Barry and Ms. Diardi were the only ones there. She does not have personal knowledge since she was not at the sanctuary.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
We have laid ample foundation for her to come to this conclusion, and I specifically asked based on her knowledge. So as far as she knew, these were the only witnesses there.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
This witness asserted actually that they were the only ones there, not that it was in her opinion or that she didn't see anyone else. So she doesn't know if in the time frame that she was gone, any of the other employees came back or there was anyone else at the island, at the sanctuary.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
I clearly asked her based on your knowledge, and she answered my question, therefore implying that this is just based on her knowledge.
I'm going to overrule the objection as it was based on the witness's knowledge only.
So Ms. Arata, can you repeat your last answer?
Yes, like I was saying, Diardi and Barry were the only ones there.
We pass the witness, Your Honor.
Permission to cross, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Arata. Now I'm just going to ask you a few questions to help clarify your testimony today. Now, let's start with when Mr. Bizarre hired you. Around 10 years ago, you were charged with some criminal mischief crimes, right?
Yes, I was hanging out with the wrong crowd and they got me to do some things that I shouldn't have done.
Right, like breaking and entering?
Yes.
And like burglary?
Yes. Well, we didn't actually steal anything.
Right.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance?
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
This is relevant as it goes to show that this witness has a criminal record and that she has had a past making a dishonest act, and that this is going to question this witness' credibility, which is entirely relevant to the trial today.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Please.
I don't believe something that happened to Ms. Arata when she was 18 is relevant to determining her credibility today.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
I believe that it is, as it goes to show her lack of credibility, and I think that the jury can come to their own conclusions about that.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Again, as this happened so long ago, this says nothing about her credibility today.
I'm going to overrule the objection. It goes to the weight of the evidence and not to whether or not it is relevant. The jury can decide its relevance.
Yes, Your Honor. So I'll re-ask my question like burglary as well.
Yes, but we didn't actually steal anything.
So you were only convicted of a misdemeanor, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Bizarre decided to hire you anyways.
Yes, I was so thankful.
Now let's talk about the night of April 30th, the day Mr. Bizarre disappeared. You went out at 7:30, correct?
Yes, I did leave the sanctuary at 7:30.
To go to the We Spy 'Em store, like you mentioned on Direct.
Yes.
And this store was about 45 minutes away.
Well, initially I was going to go to the further one, which is an hour and a half away, but I ended up going to the local one, which is, yes, 45 minutes away.
Right. And you drive a sedan, correct?
I do.
Not a truck or an SUV?
No.
And to your knowledge, you're the only person at the sanctuary who doesn't drive a truck or SUV.
I believe so.
And after you left the store, you claim you went to Snoopy's pub.
I did go to Snoopy's.
And you got there around 9?
Yes, about.
And you were annoyed with Miss Giardi for sending you out on that errand, right?
I was a bit annoyed, yes.
And while you were at the store, you got a text from Miss Giardi at 9:30 p.m.
While I was at the pub, actually.
Yes, the pub.
Yes.
And the pub is around 15 minutes from the sanctuary, correct?
Not for me, because I don't take the freeway.
It's about 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, about.
And you claim you left the pub at around 10:45 to get back to the sanctuary at 11.
Yes.
But you went to the pub by yourself, right?
Yes, I did. No one else was with me.
Right. So to your knowledge, no one can confirm when you left the pub.
No, except for myself, I guess.
Right. So after you left the pub, you claim you got back to the sanctuary at 11?
Yes, around 11 p.m.
But when you got back, you didn't come into contact with anyone?
No, I did not.
So to your knowledge, no one can confirm that you got back at 11?
Except for myself, again, I guess not.
Right. So between the hours of 9 and 11 p.m., to your knowledge, no one else can confirm your whereabouts?
Besides me, yes.
Now, on April 30th, you also noticed Mr. Bizarre's boat was missing from the dock, like you mentioned.
Yes.
And you had just assumed he'd gone out on a nighttime sail.
Yes, originally.
Because he would do that often.
Yes.
And you also know how to drive Mr. Bizarre's boat, right?
A little bit. He's shown me how to operate it.
Right. You had taken it out a few times to go fishing.
Yes, with Barry with me, though. He was always assisting me.
But you did know how to drive the boat, correct?
A little bit. It was kind of like me being a toddler on a bicycle without training wheels.
And so you weren't worried about Mr. Bizarre at first when you first noticed he was missing?
No, not originally.
And when you hadn't heard from Mr. Bizarre in a few days, you claim you started to get worried.
I was starting to get very worried.
Right, but you never actually called the Coast Guard.
No, I thought DRD was going to do that.
And you never called the police.
No, I thought DRD was also going to do that.
So, and you also know that to this day, Mr. Bizarre's body has not been found.
No, it has not been, sadly. I would love to give him a proper funeral.
Now, Ms. Arata, you were so hurt when Mr. Bizarre cut you out of his will, right?
I felt like I had done something wrong to have him demote me as a friend.
Because you felt like you and him were family for 6 years.
Yes, absolutely, we were family.
And you couldn't believe when he made Miss Diardi the new beneficiary.
It was shocking for me, yes.
Right, because you thought that she was bad news.
She did seem very suspicious to me.
A no-good slacker?
Yes, she did not do her part at the sanctuary.
She didn't always clean the cages well?
No, she did not.
So you thought that she was irresponsible?
Yes, she definitely seemed irresponsible to me.
In fact, you didn't like Miss Diardi.
No, I did not.
And you didn't like how much time she and Mr. Bizarre were spending together after the tiger attack.
No, I did not. It felt like she had some kind of malicious intent.
Now, Ms. Arata, when your parents passed away, they left you with a lot of debt, right?
Yes.
You inherited a lot of bills?
Yes, but, I don't have to pay them off.
Right, but you didn't have a way to pay them off.
Yes, and well, I have my job, and also I don't need to pay off the debt of my parents.
But you did inherit those bills,
Yes,
and you didn't have a way to pay them off.
yes, because I didn't need to.
And you were the contingent beneficiary of the will, correct?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the word contingent means.
You were second in line, as you stated on direct.
Yes, yes.
So that means if Ms. Giardi is convicted of murder today, you will inherit instead.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Redirect?
No redirect necessary, Your Honor. May this witness step down?
Yes, you may call your next witness.
Thank you.
The prosecution calls Pertelis Jacobitis to the stand.
You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Mr. Jacobitis, would you?
I'm having some technical difficulties with the sound. I can't hear y'all. Do you mind giving me a couple minutes? Just
Granted.
Of course, Mr. Jacobitis.
And as a reminder, we did previously agree that technical challenges would not be counted against your time. So,
sorry about that.
all right, the time can begin now.
So, Mr. Jacobitis, can you introduce yourself to the jury?
Sure. My name is Pertelis Jacobitis, but my friends call me Dallas. I'm a journalist who specializes in documentaries about unique individuals and businesses. I've been doing this for about 10-ish years, and until recently, I've been filming a documentary about the Big Cat Temple and Barry Bazaar and its employees like Sylvester Stiardi.
Oh, what do you know about the defendant, Sylvester Stiardi?
Sylvester Stiardi was the lead zookeeper. The zookeeper's job is to keep track of the tigers and their habitats, which didn't happen very often, but she was happy to be employed after getting out of prison, just like all the other employees there. But there was something special about her.
Well, what was the business structure between you and the late Mr. Bazaar?
He had no financial interest in the film. He wasn't paying me, and I wasn't compensating him in any way. I was blown away by his generosity because most businessmen would have seen that as an opportunity to charge crazy fees. I don't like people about my money issues, so I'm glad me and Barry saw eye to eye.
Would you recognize the letter agreement between you and the deceased if I were to show it to you?
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
Your Honor, may I have the court refer to what has been pre-marked as Exhibit 3?
Yes.
One moment. So, Mr. Jacobitis, could you describe this document?
Yeah, that is a letter agreement between me and Mr. Bazaar with the terms and agreements over my documentary.
Has it been altered?
No, ma'am, I don't believe so.
Is it accurate representation of your recollection?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Are you custodian of this document?
I am.
And it's regular business routine to make such a document?
Yes, I've made a couple before.
Was it made near the date stated on this document?
I believe so.
And its authors did have the proper knowledge to make such a document?
Yes, I do.
Your Honor, I offer Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
So admitted.
Thank you. So do you see the underlined section that says terms of documentary and filming near the middle of this page?
Yes, ma'am.
What's the fourth paragraph beneath that say?
It says neither party is obligated to pay the other party anything for the rights contained herein.
So were there any fees?
No, ma'am, no money passed between us.
Are you an employee of the Big Cat Temple?
No, I've only been there for a little over a year. All I really did is try not to get eaten and film my documentary.
Well, I bet you'd like to tell us about this documentary.
Sure. My documentary was all about the Big Cat Temple, and Barry Bazaar was the star. My fans just loved to watch Barry and his cats. That's what really made the movie. But now he's dead, and I can't release any part of my film, or even if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to because it was all burnt ashes and my studio caught fire.
Well, now that Mr. Bazaar has died and you lost the original footage, will you still continue your film about the events at the Big Cat Temple?
Not really. Sadly, like I said, but like I won't be able to show any part of the film because all burned in ashes. I mean, Barry was more interesting than the cats. I'll never be able to recreate those precious moments with Barry.
Would you say you gained anything from your time at the sanctuary?
Now, don't get me wrong. I know everybody else has had an amazing 2020, but my 2020 sucked. I mean, but you know me, I'll find something else to do sooner or later.
Well, besides the deceased, who else did you film in your documentary?
Well, besides Barry, who's really the heart and soul of my film, a good deal of it was to be based on Sylvester Diardi. I did, though, have a good 15 minutes of Kit Manuel retelling the story of Diardi's tiptoeing with death. That part was a zinger.
Well, what else did Diardi do to further your film?
Diardi's personality added a whole nother level to my documentary. I mean, Serval Arata was kind of calm and accountant-like, if you know what I mean, but not much excitement from her. Even Kit couldn't measure up the same on-the-edge sort of personality. But the interplay between Barry's refined charisma and Diardi's primal crudeness made riveting cinema and probably were the most unique part of my documentary.
Are you aware of Sylvester Diardi's salary for his job?
From my interviews, Diardi got paid about $550 a week, which, believe me, if I got paid $550 a week, I would need some kind of side hustle to get by.
Well, did Diardi ever complain about that?
Well, you know, a little bit before the disappearance last April, Diardi taking a painkiller before going on camera, maybe to relax. I interviewed Diardi that night in her trailer, and she let a few loose thoughts out that I doubt she would have normally said on camera. I really wish that part had not burned, but at least Serval saw it.
Well, what else did you witness in Diardi's trailer?
Diardi started to ramble about her situation, Barry, etc., and how she had some money problems. Then she changed topics to Barry himself. Started talking super creepy, almost like a murder confession. If I remember one thing till the day I die, it'll be that horrifying feeling I had for a week after hearing her.
Thank you. We passed the witness.
You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Jacobidis, you are creating a documentary about the Big Cat Temple, correct?
It's pronounced Jacobitis. Sorry. Just kidding. A lot of people pronounce my last name wrong. Yes, I was there filming a documentary about the family aspect and whole, like, the Big Cat Temple. It was pretty amazing.
And the first few months of filming went very well, right?
Yeah, it started off with a hit. Yeah, home run. I mean, it was really good. Well,
The best footage came from the all-employee meals, correct?
I loved the whole family aspect of it. It's kind of what really was the special part of my film.
But that was because of the tension between Miss Diardi and Miss Arata.
There was some tension there, but I mainly like the whole family aspect of the family meals. That's kind of why I filmed that.
But you liked to stir that tension, didn't you?
Stir, sir?
You like to accentuate the tension in the documentary?
Like annoy people?
The tension and drama, they were good for your film, right?
Oh, sure, people kind of like that stuff.
And a murder is a good story for your documentary now, isn't it?
Definitely. I'm hoping to get some shots to kind of make the shine light on the name Barry Bazaar.
If the defendant is convicted today, the murder of Barry Bazaar, that would be good for your documentary, right?
I mean, you can kind of go both ways right now, whether he was like the murder put behind bars or like the murder release. So like everybody watch out.
But redirecting you back to my question, that's a yes. If Miss Diardi is convicted today, that would be good for your documentary.
Oh, yeah, like I just said, sure.
Now, on direct examination, you testified that there was a fire in your shed that burned all your film and filming equipment, right?
Yes, I barely made it out with my life. I mean, I was so shocked afterwards.
But you were asleep when the fire was started, correct?
Yes, as most people tend to do, I was asleep.
And you didn't see anyone start the fire. You don't know how it happened.
Well, I was asleep, so I wouldn't be able to like see anything. Unless you can see with your eyes open while you're sleeping, but like still sleeping, but you can see everybody.
You used to smoke while in your shed, correct?
From time to time, I try not to. I like the outdoor breeze a lot more.
But you admit that sometimes you did in fact smoke in the shed at the sanctuary.
When I first got there,
That's a yes.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
And to your knowledge, no one has been charged with arson in connection to your fire and in connection to the fire, correct?
I do believe Diarty was convicted of arson. I heard something like that.
You think the defendant set the fire and destroyed your footage, correct?
Oh, I mean, I have my suspicions, but those are my conclusions but I think Leo also concluded that.
You're furious with the defendant, right?
I think anybody would be furious with a murderer, sir.
Objection, Your Honor, improper opinion. This witness cannot testify to the ultimate issue. They're not an expert.
Response, Your Honor. The question clearly asked for this opinion. He can rephrase his answer though, or his question though, and my
Response.
witness can give a better answer.
Response, Your Honor.
I'm going to overrule the objection as it was opinion of the witness. You may continue.
So restating my question, you're furious with the defendant, correct?
Like I just said, I think anybody would be furious with a murderer.
And you believe this documentary was going to be your big break, right?
At the time, but I mean, it's all burnt now.
You blame the defendant for ruining your big break.
Like I previously stated, I do have my suspicions and I did believe that, but I think Detective Leo also concluded that.
But that's a yes. You blame the defendant for ruining your big break.
I mean, I wouldn't like say blame. It's like, I blame Sylvester, she burned my shed. But like that is my suspicions.
So that's a yes?
Oh, yes. Yes, sir.
And you couldn't wait to testify against the defendant today, right?
I really hope this murderer ends up behind bars.
And that's because you want to see her pay for destroying your footage.
Even more that she murdered a close friend of mine, Barry Bizarre.
Now, in your direct, you mentioned that Miss Diarty said it would be karma for Barry to be eaten by the Y-Cat.
Yes, sir. It was almost like a murder threat. Me and several were very upset when that part burned.
But to your knowledge, there is no other witness of the defendant making this statement.
Sorry, what do you mean by, I'm confused by your question. I said, what do you mean by your question? Sorry.
To your knowledge, you are the only witness of the defendant making this statement.
Sir Villarada watched the film.
No one else was there when the statement was made, correct?
Oh, no, sir.
Now, you know that the defendant is the beneficiary of Barry Bizarre's will, right?
I do believe after a couple changes, Barry put Sylvester as the beneficiary. But I heard it through the grapevine.
And you know that Miss Elrada was the beneficiary before that?
Objection calls for hearsay. The former will has not been entered.
Response, Your Honor.
Allow it. It appears that you've run out of time, but I will allow your response.
Your Honor, the knowledge of the will is stipulated and all witnesses do know about the will.
Response, Your Honor.
I'm going to overrule the objection as that was stipulated at the beginning, and we have run out of time for this segment.
Yes, Your Honor. I understand that.
No further questions. Pass the witness.
Any redirects? I believe you're out of time.
None, Your Honor. Thank you. The prosecution rests.
The defense may call their first witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Chow Samir to the stand. Can you introduce yourself to the court?
Yes, my name is Chow Snamir.
Oh, actually, we should probably wait for the opposing counsel to appear on
Yes,
the screen.
please wait until everyone is present. Okay, now you may continue for the defense.
Ms. Samir, what do you do for a living?
I used to be in the Marines, but I now work in the Texoma Marina and have for about 10 years.
And where do you live?
I actually live on my boat inside the marina.
What kind of work do you do there?
I'm in charge of taking care of all the boats and making sure that they are in ship-shape condition.
And do you know any of the owners of these boats?
Yes, I do. I actually know Barry Bizarre.
How did you know Mr. Bizarre?
Well, you see, Mr. Bazaar was my neighbor and had been for about 10 years. He lived right behind my marina at the Big Cat Sanctuary.
Did you work on Mr. Bazaar's boat?
Yes, I worked on it all the time.
Can you describe his boat?
I sure can. I equipped it with rations, water, tools, fishing gear, an EPIRB, and an inflatable dinghy that had a small motor attached to it. Basically, anything you could think of, it had it.
Why did you keep it so well equipped?
Well, you see, Barry liked to go on all of these unannounced sailabouts, so I just wanted to make sure that the boat was always ready for him.
What's a sail about?
A sailabout was Barry's term he coined. It was his unannounced trips that he would just go on all the time.
You mentioned that you're Mr. Bazaar's neighbor. Is there anyone else you know that works at the sanctuary?
Yes, I knew both Sylvester Stiardi and Sir Lorada.
How did you get to know them?
They came down to the marina quite often, mostly Arata though, just to make sure that Barry's boat was ready to go if he ever wanted to go out.
And what did you observe about Miss Arata?
I observed that she really liked to stick around and chat at the marina whenever she would come down.
And what did you notice? When was the last time she visited you?
The last time she visited was about a week before Barry mysteriously disappeared. It was and I noticed that she was fuming mad about something that last time she came in.
And do you know what she was mad about?
Yes, I was actually did know. She was saying something about Diardi and inheriting the sanctuary.
You're muted.
I'm sorry. Yes, I was objecting to hearsay. This witness is testifying as to Ms. Arata's statement.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes, please.
This is an exception to hearsay under Rule 8033, the existing mental state, and Ms. Arata's statement was showing her mindset and her motive to frame Mr. Or Miss Diardi in order to inherit the sanctuary. So her talking about inheriting the sanctuary in place of Miss Diardi is showing her mindset.
May I respond?
Yes.
Your Honor, this trial is about whether or not Sylvester Diardi murdered Barry Bazaar, not whether or not Serval Arata had a motive, intent, or plan regarding Mr. Bazaar or the Big Cat Temple.
I'm going to overrule the objection as it goes to the mindset of the declarant, who is also a witness here today. You may proceed.
I'm going to react to my question, Ms. Namir. Do you know what Miss Arata was mad about?
Yes, she was muttering about how Diardi would never inherit the sanctuary. She had this odd grin on her face too while she was saying it.
And did you ever see Miss Arata again after Mr. Bazaar disappeared?
Yes, I did, right after Diardi had been arrested. Thinking about it still gives me goosebumps.
What do you mean?
Well, she just had this weird menacing grin on her face. She seemed different to me.
And what was your impression from your interactions with Miss Arata?
I was under the impression that she was obsessed with Barry and inheriting the sanctuary.
Let's talk about the night of Mr. Bazaar's disappearance. What were you doing that night?
That night I was just doing my usual work on the boats in the marina.
And did you see anyone from the sanctuary?
I didn't actually see anybody, but I did hear Diardi call out to me at around 9:30 p.m.
And did you notice anything else after that?
Yes, I did actually. About 15 minutes later, I would say 9:45, I saw a sedan pass me on the back road that borders the Big Cat Sanctuary and my marina.
And do you know who uses the dirt road?
Yes, only the sanctuary employees use that road because at that time they're closed and guests have their own road and parking lot that they use.
And to your knowledge, who drives a sedan?
To my knowledge, only Serval Arata drove a sedan. Everybody else that I saw every day either had a truck or an SUV.
So who do you believe was returning to the sanctuary at 9:45 that night?
I personally believe that it was Serval Arata.
Let's talk about the day of Mr. Bazaar's disappearance. Had you seen him at all that day?
No, I had not actually.
And did you notice anything unusual at the marina that night?
Yes, the boat did go out at around 10:30 p.m.
Did you see Mr. Bazaar as he left on his boat?
No, I didn't.
Was that unusual?
Yes, I would say it was pretty unusual for him to not tell me.
Do you know if anyone else could drive the boat?
Yes, I know that both Serval Arata and Sylvester Diardi could.
And was there a way to track Mr. Bazar's boat after it left the marina?
Yes, there are actually two ways. The first way was the EPIRB.
What's an EPIRB?
And EPIRB stands for Emergency Position Indicating Radar Beacon, and it's activated once it hits the water and is submerged.
So if Barry's boat were to crash, this EPIRB would go off?
Well, technically, yes. The only issue with that was it was in my tool shed because I was working on it. So it wasn't actually on the boat at that time.
And what was the second way to track Mr. Bazar's boat?
The second way was the Me Finder, which was attached to the boat's GPS.
And was this Me Finder working?
It was up until around 11 p.m. when the last two pings were detected.
And do you know where these pings were coming from?
Yes, I do actually. The last two pings were tracked at about 3 miles out from the marina, headed west towards the open ocean instead of just the bay.
And how was the weather that evening?
Well, the weather was completely fine until a typhoon came through.
Your Honor, permission to instruct the witness and begin to reference Exhibit 2, which is stipulated.
Permission granted.
Ms. Namir, can you tell the jury the predicted path of the typhoon?
Yes, I can. So as you can see here, the predicted path was over here. It was supposed to be going parallel to the Texoma Bay.
And can you tell the jury the actual path the typhoon took that night?
I can. So right around here, about 8 p.m., I would say, the typhoon suddenly veered and became closer to the Texoma Bay.
And based off the Me Finder pings, do you know the path of Barry Bazar's boat?
Yes, while the last two pings were detected in the Texoma Bay, Barry's boat would have been headed straight towards Siegfried Island.
And based off this path, would Barry have been in the vicinity of the typhoon?
Yes, he would have been going in its direct direction.
And did you know that this typhoon was coming?
I did. We all did actually. But what nobody knew was that it would suddenly veer and get closer to the marina.
Objection, speculation. This witness is speculating as to who knew and who did not know about the typhoon.
Response, Your Honor?
Yes.
She's testifying based off the exhibit that the predicted path was not close to the marina, so it's impossible for someone to know that it's coming to the marina when the predicted path is in the opposite direction.
I don't believe that was what was objected to, so I'm going to sustain the objection. She can only testify to what she knew, not what everyone else knew.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Mr. Muir, did you know that this typhoon was coming?
Yes, I did, but I did not know that it would suddenly veer.
And earlier you mentioned that Mr. Bazar's boat had a dinghy with a trolling motor. How long would it take that dinghy to return to shore if it was 3 miles out?
Well, you see, the dinghy was able to go about 5 miles per hour, so it would have taken about 30 minutes to get back to the marina.
And given your knowledge of Barry's boat, what would happen to it if there was no one steering it?
I think if nobody had been steering it, it would have been able to hold its course and speed throughout its trip.
And based on your extensive knowledge of sailing, do you believe that Mr. Bazar's boat would have survived that typhoon?
No, I do not think that it would have been able to survive. I think I'm the only person that would have been able to navigate any storm remotely like that.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
May I proceed with cross-examination?
You may proceed.
May I have the witness in court refer to what is to Exhibit 2?
Yes.
Now, looking at this map, Ms. Nemeyer, the storm was at least 30 miles away from Big Cat Temple at 11 p.m.
Yes, it was.
And the last GPS signal you got from Barry Bazar's boat came a little after 11.
Yes, that's right.
And at that time, it was still in the Texoma Bay.
Yes, it was, but I knew the path it would have been going on.
But there's no evidence to which direction it went. The only pings are inside the bay, correct?
I mean, there's no evidence, but I've been sailing for years and I know how the boats work. I know how the pings work. And it is my educated guess that that's how the path would have continued.
Redirecting you back to my question, you don't know. There is no evidence to show which way the boat went once it left the bay.
I don't know for sure, but I can pretty confidently say it would have continued straight.
But you don't know, isn't that right?
Not for 100% certainty, no.
All right, thank you. Now, the storm never touched the coast, did it?
No, it did not.
In your knowledge of seafaring, is it possible for someone to leave the bay and sail up the coast?
They could,
And they could also sail down the coast.
if they so wished.
And either way, they would have been roughly 30 miles away from the typhoon.
Yes, if they, for some reason, decided to go up or down near the coast.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Bizarre would always stop by your boat before going on a sail about.
Not every single time, but it was more common than not.
And you encouraged him personally to keep a GPS on his yacht.
Yes, he did keep one on there.
Yet, on the night of April 30th, the GPS was switched off quickly.
I wouldn't say quickly. I mean, it was on for a little bit and then it wasn't. And I don't know for sure what happened to it. Many things could have happened to it. It could have malfunctioned or
But
Barry
it wasn't on, correct?
It was on for a little bit and then it turned off.
And you also made sure he had an additional safety device on board, the EPIRB.
Yes.
And the EPIRB was missing from the yacht that night.
Yes, because I was working on it in my tool shed.
And you had told Mr. Bizarre that you were fixing it in your tool shed.
Bizarre knew what things were and were not being fixed.
But Mr. Bizarre did not check in with you to ensure the EPIRB equipment had been reinstalled that night.
No, he hadn't, but he sometimes didn't check in with me.
And later, after the yacht left the marina, Mr. Bizarre did not call you.
That's right. Like I said, sometimes he leaves with telling me, sometimes he doesn't. And this time he just didn't tell me that he was leaving.
So he didn't call you or text you?
Nope. Like I've said, I had no contact with him.
In fact, Mr. Bizarre did nothing he normally does before his sailabouts.
Not necessarily. It was unusual that he left without telling me, but nothing that he hadn't done before.
Now, let's talk about Miss Diardi for a moment.
I believe there's an objection.
Yes, Your Honor, I'm objecting to speculation as Miss Namir can't know everything Barry Bizarre did before he left on his sailabouts. She can only testify to her interactions, but the question that opposing counsel asked calls for speculation as it's asking her what he did and did not normally do.
May I respond?
Yes.
I have laid the foundation for the regular interaction between the marina supervisor and Barry Bizarre regarding what Mr. Bizarre would do before he left on his sailabouts.
No, overrule the objection as the witness can testify to what she believes is his normal routine.
May I re-ask my question for clarity?
Yes, please continue.
In fact, Mr. Bizarre did nothing he normally does before leaving on one of his sailabouts.
Well, he didn't talk to me before. That was one thing that he didn't do that he sometimes did.
Thank you. Now let's talk about Miss Diardi for a moment. First of all, she did know how to operate the Cat's Ironic.
She knew how, and so did Arata.
You actually heard her call out to you at 9:30 on April 30th.
Yes, I did.
So we do know where Miss Diardi was at 9:30.
I mean, a general sense. I heard her at 9:30. I have no idea what she did after she called out to me. She could have gone anywhere after that.
Exactly. You don't know where she was before.
No, I do not.
And you don't know where she went afterwards.
No, I don't.
Thank you, Your Honor. We pass the witness.
Any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I ask that my witness be able to step down.
Granted. May I call your next witness?
Your Honor, the defense calls Kit Manul to the stand. Permission to proceed?
You may proceed.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hi, my name is Kit Manul.
And Ms. Manul, what do you do for a living?
I'm the senior maintenance and repair technician at the Big Cat Temple Sanctuary. You can just call me the handy human.
How long have you been working there?
4.5 years now.
And what's your specific role at the sanctuary?
Well, I basically keep the place running. I work the meat grinder and I really do any other odd job that Barry needs me to do.
Do you ever work with the animals at the sanctuary?
Only to clean their cages, which actually was another one of my main jobs. And when I'm out, Serval Lorata helps me clean the cages.
So let's talk about the night Barry Bizarre disappeared. Did you see Mr. Bizarre that day?
Yes, that night we had our usual all hands dinner.
And what did you do next after dinner?
Well, Bob, a part-time employee, and I went to a meat processing plant that was shutting down. We left about 6:30 that night in Barry's big refrigerated truck.
What time did you get back to the sanctuary?
Around 1:30.
And what did you do when you got back?
Well, we parked the big refrigerated truck and I started unloading all the meat.
And what you do next?
Well, I started processing all the meat because I wanted to make sure it was ready to go for the next morning.
Did you observe anything about the meat processing room when you were there?
Yes, it was so strange. The meat grinders smelled like they had been used, and the meat processing room looked like it had been used too.
Do you know when they had been used?
Sylvester said he heard the grinding equipment around 11:30 that night.
Did you ever observe Miss Diardi going on a run around the sanctuary?
Oh yes, Sylvester would go on long runs all the time in a 10-mile loop, way more than I could ever run.
And how long would she go running?
About an hour and a half.
Were you here in court today when Detective Leo testified about the fire?
Yes, sir, I was.
Did you hear her testify that the fire was possibly arson?
Yes, sir.
Were you at the sanctuary at the time of the fire?
Yes, I was actually the one who called 911. I woke up to the cat's crazy noises. Then I saw all this light pouring into my trailer. I looked outside my trailer to see that PJ's shed was on fire. Then I called 911.
Your Honor, permission to retrieve Exhibit 5, which has already been admitted into evidence.
Granted.
Ms. Manul, could you read your last words to the 911 dispatcher?
Of course. Yeah, this is Kit Manul. I work here at the Cat Temple. You know, it smells like an electrical fire. Maybe something short-circuited or something, you know. Hey, I just realized the smoke alarm isn't going off. I swear, those pieces of junk that Serval bought are going to end up killing one of us. I bet Barry will upgrade them now and...
So you said it smelled like an electrical fire. How do you know that?
Oh, well, I've smelled that smell so many times before, and I knew that PJ had lots of electrical equipment in his shed.
Do you know who has keys to the shed?
Only Barry and PJ himself. PJ kept that shed locked tight.
So let's talk about Mr. Bizarre's boat. Did you ever observe Mr. Bizarre taking his boat out to sea?
Oh, yes. Barry liked to take a lot of little trips on his boat called the Cat's Ironic. That thing was so well stocked that he could jump on board at any time.
Do you know how long his trips were?
Usually 3 to 4 days, or even longer if he was lucky catching fish.
And did you always know when Mr. Bizarre was going to leave?
No, it wasn't uncommon for Barry to take a last-minute trip to blow off some steam.
You said you worked as a sanctuary for 4.5 years. In that time, have you gotten to know Mr. Bizarre well?
Oh, yeah. Well, when you live, eat, and work with someone for 4.5 years, you get to know them really well.
And did you notice who he was close to?
Well, Barry was really always friendly to everyone at the sanctuary, but I observed that he got especially close to Sylvester Diardi after Sylvester saved his life.
Can you tell the defendant can you tell the jury how the defendant saved Mr. Bizarre's life?
Yes, it was crazy. Barry all of a sudden got attacked by one of our tigers. I thought for sure he was a goner, when all of a sudden Sylvester jumped in the cage and distracted that cat right off of Barry.
Did you ever observe anything negative between the defendant and Mr. Bizarre?
No, only a close relationship.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Prosecution may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Ms. Manul, you believe that the meat processing room could have been used to dispose of a human body?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
It would be easy to process, just like any other meat.
Yes, it would be similar to any other meat.
And you believe that it would only take an hour or so?
Yes, ma'am.
But when you got back to the Big Cat Temple at 1:30 a.m. on May 1st, 2020, the meat processing room smelled like it had been used.
Yes, it was so strange.
It even looked like it had been used.
Yes, ma'am, that's right.
But isn't it true the whole reason you were sent to buy more meat because there was little to none meat at the Big Cat Temple?
Yes, ma'am, that's why I was sent out.
You mentioned in your direct that you're the head maintenance technician at the Big Cat Temple.
Yes, ma'am, that's right.
And as the head of maintenance, one of your main goals should be to keep the sanctuary safe.
Yes, ma'am, for sure.
And to keep the sanctuary safe, you're in charge of repairing or replacing things like security cameras or fire alarms, right?
That's right.
Now, Diardi was anxious to get things like security cameras on April 30th.
Yes, ma'am.
But Diardi never instructed you to actually install those cameras now, did he?
No, ma'am, he didn't.
Even though safety was the reason that cameras were being rushed to purchase, they still weren't installed by the time Detective Sunday Leo came and investigated the sanctuary 4 days later.
Yes, ma'am.
The Big Cat Temple is pretty famous, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, everyone knew about it.
And it's been 8 months since Barry disappeared.
Yes, ma'am, unfortunately.
8 months since anyone has heard anything from Barry.
Yes.
But prior to April 30th, you aren't aware of a single time that Mr. Bizarre had been gone for more than a single week.
No, ma'am, I don't know exactly.
Redirecting you back to my question, you aren't aware of a single time when he had been gone for more than 1 week?
No, ma'am, I'm not aware.
Thank you. You passed the witness.
Can you redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor. I ask that my witness be allowed to step down.
Yes. You may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Sylvester Diardi to the stand. And Your Honor, before I proceed, may I inquire as to how much time is left for the defense's direct?
Timekeepers are posting 15 minutes is all I see.
If they could post the updated direct for the defense. Since I believe that was for the cross.
I see both direct and cross listed at 15 minutes. Is there any addition to that? 13 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, you may proceed.
Good morning. Can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Good morning. My name is Sylvester Diardi.
Now, we've heard a lot about you today in court and how you work at the cat sanctuary. How long have you been working there?
Well, a good 2 years.
And what do you do?
Well, I'm Barry's supervisor. It's my job to supervise all the full-time and part-time staff. Just help them with whatever they need, their jobs whenever I can.
And have you always been the supervisor?
Oh, no, ma'am. Only after I saved him quite a bit of money.
And how did you help save money?
Well, I learned that tons of different stores throw away perfectly good meat after their sell-by date, and I thought that we could save money by buying the meat at a cheaper cost to feed to the cats.
And was this plan approved?
Oh, yes, ma'am. We saved so much money that Barry actually made me the supervisor as a result.
And did you know that this food was safe for the cats to eat?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And were you here today in court during Ms. Arata's testimony?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And did you hear her testify about tension between you and Mr. Bizarre?
Yes, but there was never, any tension between us. I felt like Arata was bad-mouthing me, but we're real close.
So did you ever actually feed the cats the meat?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Sometimes I did.
And did you ever keep a log of these feedings?
Yes, I did. Whenever I fed them, I'd, keep it in my feeding notes.
Your Honor, permission to instruct the witness to turn to Exhibit 7.
Granted.
Can you identify this document?
Yes, ma'am. This is a log that I'd use to record when I fed the cats.
And did you use this log as part of your job?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it a true and correct copy of Exhibit 7?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
No, ma'am, I don't believe so.
And were these notes made at or near the time the cats were fed?
Yes, ma'am.
And was this log kept in the regular course of business?
Yes, ma'am.
And was making this log a regular practice of business?
Yes, ma'am, it was.
And are you a custodian of this document?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
And is the source of this information trustworthy?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, the defense moves to offer Exhibit 7 into evidence as a business record under Rule 8036.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
So admitted.
And Your Honor, may I publish Exhibit 7 to the jury so they may follow along?
Yes.
Now, Ms. Diardi, can you read the 4:30 notes from April 27th?
Yes, ma'am. Floor 30 fed all cats except Y Cat, who was in one of her moods and unable to feed again. We'll try again in an hour.
And can you read the 4 o'clock note from April 28th?
Yes, ma'am. 4 o'clock. Isabel not fed because food still left over from previous day. Perhaps not eaten again. Y Cat in another mood and unable to feed.
And can you read the one from 10:15 on April 29th?
10:15 a.m. fed the middle 5 cages, which includes Bycat.
So was Ycat being fed in the days leading up to Mr. Bizarre's disappearance?
Yes, ma'am, certainly. But sometimes she was in a mood and just didn't want to eat.
And finally, can you read the note from May 1st at 8:45 a.m.?
Yes, ma'am. Meat stocked back up, fed all big cats, which includes Bycat.
So how long have you been feeding the cats at the sanctuary?
Oh, for a good 2 years.
So over those 2 years, have you gotten to know their eating habits well?
Well, certainly. I definitely would. I mean, I kept these feeding notes whenever they'd eat.
So to your knowledge, if the Ycat had been fed the night before on April 30th, would she have been hungry that morning on May 1st?
No, ma'am, I don't believe so.
So over your 2 years,
Speculation. The witness does have experience with big cats, but they are very unpredictable, and she cannot come to a solid conclusion about whether or not Ycat would have wanted more food.
response, Your Honor.
Yes.
I've already laid the foundation for how this witness would have that knowledge. She's worked with them for over 2 years, and she keeps thorough feeding notes of their eating habits, so she would have knowledge of that. And she's simply sharing her opinion, as I asked in my question, based off her rationally based perception, which she can do under Rule 701. And I've laid the foundation for how this would be rationally based.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
If it was anything other than big cats, she could come to this conclusion. However, these are wild animals and very unpredictable, so you can never truly know what they're doing next.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
I believe that their eating habits are somewhat predictable, as she's already testified today, and it's not have been entered in court that it is unpredictable. And I believe that she could testify to rationally based perception and her own opinion.
The objection is overruled. It's based on the witness's account. You may proceed.
Now, Ms. Yardy, over your 2 years working at the cat sanctuary, did you get to know Mr. Bizarre well?
Oh, yes, ma'am, certainly.
And how would you describe your relationship with him?
Well, Barry was like a father to me. I mean, he saved my life when he hired me and trusted me.
And how did he save your life?
Well, I had a rough childhood, and I didn't really know what to do with my life, but Barry gave me, a job and a home and a family, and I was just so grateful. And I was real glad that I felt like I was able to repay him.
And how were you able to repay him?
Well, about a year ago, I saved his life from a tiger attack.
And can you describe this tiger attack?
Yes, ma'am. Barry went into one of the new tiger enclosures without any protection. In just a minute, the cat had attacked him and pinned him to the ground. So I ran into the cage and distracted her so that Barry could get away.
So what happened after you saved Mr. Bizarre's life from the tiger attack?
Well, we grew really close. Our relationship changed from a boss-employee relationship to a father-daughter one, really. After that incident, he even went so far as to change his will in my favor.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, Sarah Rada used to be the beneficiary, but then Barry made me the beneficiary, and I was so touched.
And do you know who's the contingent beneficiary?
Yes, ma'am, Sarah Rada. She would inherit the sanctuary if I wasn't able to.
And do you know Miss Arata well?
Well, certainly. I've worked with her and lived with her for the past 2 years.
And did you observe any tension between you and Miss Arata after this change in the will?
Well, yes, I did. In my opinion, Miss Arata seemed to downright hate me.
And what made you think that?
Well, she started, bad-mouthing me, and I felt like she was trying to get in between me and Barry and frame me for things that I didn't do.
So let's talk about the night that Mr. Bizarre disappeared, April 30th. What did you do that day?
Well, I did my job, which was to help get everyone off on their important errands.
And what did you do after that?
Well, around 9:30 p.m. on April 30th, I went out on a run like I always do, just around the dirt path that goes around the cat sanctuary.
And did you do anything before your run?
Well, yes, ma'am. I texted Servo Rada to tell him I was going running.
And about how long was your run?
It was a good 10 miles. Like I said, I run a lot, and it usually takes me about 10 or so minutes per mile.
And did you encounter anyone on your run?
Yes, ma'am. When I passed the marina, I called out to Charles Namir.
And what did you do after your run?
Well, it was real hot like it gets in Texoma, so I jumped in the marina just for a quick swim. And then I went back to my trailer and spent the rest of the night there.
So approximately when did you get back from your run?
I'd say around 11:15-ish.
So how long were you on your run and swim on April 30th?
Well, I would say from around 9:30 to 11:15-ish.
And did you see anyone else that night?
Well, I didn't see anyone, but when I came back, I was surprised to see Serval's car parked next to her trailer.
And did you see Miss Arata after your run?
No, ma'am, but I did hear the machinery in the meat processing room going off at the same time, which I thought was weird.
And why did you think that was weird?
Well, I heard the machinery going off, but the crew was not yet back with the new meat to cut up.
And so, did you see anyone else's car at the sanctuary during this time?
No, ma'am, just Serval Arata's car.
And were you here in court today during Detective Leo's testimony?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you hear her testify to finding your blood and Mr. Bizarre's blood on the Y-Cat cage?
Yes, and both of us have been, swatted by time to time by the Y-Cat. I mean, she's a wild cat. And those blood drops probably would have been there for months, especially because they were so high up, as I understand, and I don't believe we ever cleaned that high.
And did you hear her testify about finding your fingerprints on the fire alarm?
Yes, ma'am. But that'd be normal too, because sometimes I'd cover for Kit Manule because he's a little lazy and forget to, fill in the batteries.
So let's talk a bit about Mr. Bizarre's boat. Do you know how to drive his boat?
Well, he was teaching me, so I'd gone out a couple of times with Barry, but I couldn't do it on my own.
And to your knowledge, did Mr. Bizarre go sailing often?
Oh, yes, ma'am, certainly. Whenever he'd kind of feel like it, he'd just take his boat out and sail for a while. It was a pretty normal thing.
And would Mr. Bizarre always inform you when he was sailing away?
Well, sometimes yes, and sometimes no. Like I said, he was so free-spirited, so it wasn't, too unusual for him to go out.
And how long would Mr. Bizarre normally stay out?
Well, sometimes it'd be just a short outing, but, other times it could be for, up to a week or so if he was lucky catching fish.
And did you observe anything unusual about Mr. Bizarre's behavior in the days leading up to April 30th?
Well, as a matter of fact, as his close friend, he confided in me about, wanting to get away from it all a couple weeks before April 30th.
And when did you notice that Mr. Bizarre was missing?
Well, on May 1st, but I would just assume that he was out sailing.
And were you concerned about him at all?
Well, no, ma'am, not at that point, not at first, because, he went out so often, but as soon as I learned that typhoon, had changed direction and could have been in his path, I got real concerned.
So what did you do?
Well, at that point, I wanted to call the Coast Guard, but Arata wanted to call the police instead, so I left her to it. Only later, I found out she didn't do either.
And did you hear Mr. Jacobit's testimony today in court that he heard you say, wouldn't it be perfect karma if Barry was eaten by the Y-Cat?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you ever say that?
No, ma'am, certainly not.
And Mr. Arata, Ms. Diardi, do you know where Mr. Bizarre is?
No, ma'am, I have no idea. I mean, I'm really worried that, he got lost in the typhoon or that Serval killed him in revenge for changing his will.
And Ms. Diardi, did you kill Mr. Bizarre?
No, ma'am. I would never do that. I mean, Barry was like a father to me. I loved him.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Cross-examination, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Hello, Ms. Diardi. Now I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, at the time of Mr. Bizarre's disappearance, you were the main beneficiary in his will.
Yes, ma'am. I believe so.
Now, you believe he is the sole owner of the Big Cat Temple.
Yes, ma'am, he is.
Do you also believe he owns a boat called the Cat's Ironic?
Yes, ma'am.
And at the time of Mr. Bizarre's disappearance, you had gambling debt, right?
Well, I had a little bit, but, I was paying it off easy on an installment plan with the pay I got every week.
You knew Mr. Bizarre changed his will frequently.
Well, I'd been aware he changed it a couple times, but I'd been the beneficiary for about a year or so because I saved his life.
And you also knew that in order to inherit Mr. Bizarre's estate, you must be the main beneficiary in his will when he died, right?
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
Now, the Big Cat Temple has 15 cats.
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Each one of these cats is a deadly weapon.
Well, I mean, they're wild animals, but,
well, they could easily kill someone, correct?
I believe it is possible. I mean, they are big cats.
And they are even more unpredictable when they're underfed.
I'm not quite sure. I'd assume so, but none of our cats were ever underfed.
And Miss Diardi, a few days before April 30th, you knew that the Big Cat Temple was low on cat food.
Yes, ma'am, I knew that. That's why I sent some people out to go get some.
And the cat who was fed the very least was Mr. Bazaar's favorite, White Cat.
Well, yes, ma'am. As I said earlier,
Thank you.
the White Cat
Now-
knows me.
That's all interesting, but that answered my question. Now, you heard these cats have also been known to attack, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Occasionally. It's rare, but yes, ma'am.
And these attacks are quite bloody.
Well, I guess it would depend on the attack.
Now, in White Cat's cage, traces of your blood and Mr. Bazaar's were found, correct?
We've been been swatted a couple times, so yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Now, a day or two before April 30th, you heard about a distant meat plant shutting down and selling super cheap meat.
Yes, ma'am. We always try to look for the best prices.
But despite being low on meat, you didn't send employees to purchase meat that day, did you?
Well, no, ma'am, not then. We still had a little bit.
You waited until April 30th.
Well, I just, told the employees we were low on meat. I don't remember.
Is that a yes to my question?
Well, yes, ma'am, I believe so.
And on April 30th, you ran completely out of meat.
Yes, ma'am, which is why people went to go get meat.
Now let's talk more about April 30th. You gave all of your employees errands to run that night.
Yes, ma'am, it's my job.
You sent Serval Arata to a camera store.
Yes, ma'am, a couple of our comments on the Spritz.
Normally, you would have sent her to your local store, right?
Yes, ma'am, but I was misinformed they didn't have any.
Yeah, so you sent her to a store that was much further away.
Yes, ma'am.
And this errand could have been run Wednesday, April 29th.
I assume so, but she didn't go earlier.
And it could have been run Friday, May 1st.
I suppose so. Mr. Rada was the one running the errand.
But again, you waited until Thursday, May 30th, right?
Well, I'm sure Rada could have gone out any other time.
Now, April 30th was a Thursday, correct?
Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
And you know that every Thursday, Pardalis Jacobitis and his film crew leave the Big Cat Temple and don't return until early the next morning.
Yes, ma'am, to go out drinking.
So Thursday, May 30th was the day that you needed to send Kip Manuel and your part-time employee on a 6 to 7 hour journey to purchase that new meat, right?
Yes, ma'am, we were out of meat.
And this was the day you needed to send Serval Arata to get the video cameras.
Not needed, ma'am. It's just the day that, everyone went out on their jobs.
And Ms. Diardi, when you planned these errands, you knew that you and Mr. Bazaar would be alone at the Big Cat Temple.
Objection, Your Honor. This question calls for speculation, as my witness would not know where other people would be, and she cannot testify as to that.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
This question does not call for speculation, as Ms. Diardi was the supervisor of the employees at the Big Cat Temple and knows that everyone else had been instructed to leave, and she actually saw them leave. And furthermore, she knew no one was allowed at the Big Cat Temple after hours.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
This question asked her whether she knew everyone would be gone. She would have no way of knowing if people would go out on their errands exactly when she told them to, or when they would have come back from their errands.
Would you like me to rephrase, Your Honor?
I'm going to sustain the objection. Please rephrase your question.
Now, Ms. Diardi, when you planned these errands, it was very reasonable to conclude that you would have been alone at the Big Cat Temple with Mr. Bazaar.
Well, not quite, ma'am. I mean, everyone's, errands were in different places, different distances. They could have left at different times.
Ms. Diardi, it was not reasonable to conclude that when you told all of your employees to leave the Big Cat Temple, that they would actually leave the Big Cat Temple?
Well, yes, ma'am, but I didn't know when times they would leave or come back.
So it was reasonable to conclude that all of them were going to leave that night.
Objection, Your Honor. Austin answered. My witness has already given her answer to this question.
May I respond, Your Honor?
I'm going to sustain the objection. Please move on.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, you claim you went on a run the night of April 30th.
Yes, ma'am. I do it quite frequently.
You say you left around 9:30.
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Now, when you left, you believed the only person at the Big Cat Temple was Mr. Bazaar.
Honestly, ma'am, I wasn't aware of who was there or not. I couldn't be for sure.
I'll rephrase. So you believed the only employee who was still there was Mr. Bazaar.
I wasn't quite sure, but I'd assume so. I wouldn't know for sure. I couldn't say I did.
So if Mr. Bazaar was the only employee there, he was the only person who may have had to deal with an emergency with the cats.
Objection, Your Honor. This question calls for speculation.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm asking this, Ms. Diardi, if it was a possibility that Mr. Bazaar may have had to deal with an emergency with the big cats, not whether there was definitely going to be one.
I'm going to sustain the objection as your response includes a speculation.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Diardi, is it possible there could have been an emergency with the big cats?
I'd assume so. I'm not sure. No, ma'am.
And Mr. Bazaar was the only one, if he was the only employee, he was the only one who may have had to deal with that emergency.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. This is the same question she asked a few moments ago.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
I've laid the foundation for the witness to reasonably conclude this answer.
Overruled. You may respond to the question.
So, Ms. Diardi, if Mr. Bazaar was the only employee at the Big Cat Temple, he was the only person who could have had to deal with a possible emergency.
Well, dealing with hypotheticals, I suppose so.
And you know from personal experience that backup in a situation with the cats can be a matter of life and death.
Yes, ma'am, I'd say so. I kind of learned that when I saved his life.
Exactly. So, Miss Diardi, when did you let Mr. Bazaar know that you were leaving the Big Cat Temple?
Pardon? I'm sorry, I'm Diardi.
When did you let, excuse me, when did you let Mr. Bazaar know that you were leaving the Big Cat Temple?
When I went on my run?
Yes, did you let him know? What time?
No, ma'am, I didn't. I texted Arata so someone knew I was. I didn't know where Barry was or what he was doing.
So you texted Serval Arata, who was not at the Big Cat Temple?
Yes, ma'am, so someone would know where I was. I don't want to bother Barry.
Now, you also claimed on direct that you never had any arguments with Mr. Bazaar.
No, ma'am, we were real close. I mean, he was like a father to me.
But isn't it true that recently you had what you called a dust-up with Mr. Bazaar?
Well, someone had, been bad-mouthing me, but I cleared it up and...
Redirecting you back to my question, was there a dust-up?
Certainly not an argument, but yeah, I'd say just a little clarification was needed.
Now, this isn't your first problem with the law, is it?
Pardon?
Objection, Your Honor. Under Rule 609, evidence of criminal conviction can only be admitted if the probative value substantially outweighs the prejudicial value, and I believe the opposing counsel is using this in a prejudicial way, and this should not be admitted into evidence today.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm laying the foundation to address motive and also credibility with this line of questioning. This is not being used to prove anything about this criminal past relating to her committing the murder. This is not character evidence or, excuse me, what was the rule number?
Under Rule 609.
Thank you.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
I do not believe that opposing counsel is using this to show motive, and they cannot actually use this to show motive as it was unrelated. And furthermore, I would argue that this is more prejudicial than probative, and it does not go to show any more a charge of the case is more likely or not.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
This is laying the foundation to show motive, and also this is showing credibility.
Response, Your Honor.
Briefly.
Even if it was going to show motive, which I do not believe it can, it is still more prejudicial than probative.
Going to overrule the objection. Be careful in your questions that you don't go beyond the scope.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Diardi, you were previously charged with burglary and arson.
Yes, ma'am. I had a rough childhood and I struggled with some, getting into trouble, but I changed my ways.
And you still deny these crimes, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I was running with the wrong crowd, but I never torched a home. I don't know why I was accused of that.
Yeah, you blame your life choices on getting in with the wrong crowd.
Well, I would say it more had to do with some pretty heavy addiction that I faced, ma'am.
But would you agree part of it was getting in with the wrong crowd?
Yes, ma'am. I do agree with that.
And now you want the jury to believe you avoid the wrong crowd.
Well, certainly, ma'am. I was, had some new kind of family with like Barry, and I felt like I was with some really great people.
And Now, isn't it true that you participate in gambling with people you refer to as wise guys?
Objection, Your Honor. Improper character evidence opposing counsel this evidence is more prejudicial than probative.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
I am attacking credibility and motive. This is not being used to show that she committed the murder. Or this
Your
is
Honor.
not being used to show that since she, I guess, associated with these wise guys, she committed the murder.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes.
I'm not objecting to that. I'm objecting that this evidence is more prejudicial than probative, and it is not going to show one of the charges is more likely. It is simply trying to prejudice the jury against this witness.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
This is definitely motive evidence, as this is showing a motive, and my next question will completely make it incredibly clear how this is motive, and motive is explicitly allowed under Rule 404B2.
I'm going to overrule the objection, but again, I caution you to maintain the scope.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Ms. Diardi, you do gamble with these people you refer to as wise guys, right?
Yes, ma'am, but not anymore.
And isn't it true that you have considered the possibility of these wise guys breaking your bones if you don't pay on time?
Well, I wouldn't want to leave any debts unpaid.
Now, have you considered the possibility of these wise guys breaking your bones?
I guess, I assume so, ma'am.
Thank you. Now, when you heard that one of the paths Mr. Bazar's boat may have taken intercepted Typhoon Judy, you urged Ms. Arata to call the Coast Guard.
Yes, ma'am, certainly. I was real concerned.
Now, you were just as capable of calling the Coast Guard as she was, correct?
Well, yes, ma'am, but I was under the impression that she was doing it.
But you never did it yourself, right?
No, ma'am. I was under the impression that Arata was.
So, to sum it all up, at the time of the murder, you had gambling debt.
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm trying to clarify for the jury this witness's testimony today.
Overruled. You may continue.
So at the time of Mr. Bazar's disappearance, you had gambling debt.
Well, yes, ma'am, but I was paying it all off on an installment plan and was not concerned about it at all.
And a series of your actions led to you and Mr. Bazar possibly being alone at the Big Cat Temple.
I can't say for certain we were, ma'am. I don't know if we were at all.
But it's reasonable to conclude you were probably alone.
It's possible, but I couldn't say yes or no, ma'am.
And Ms. Diardi, the day after that night, Mr. Bazar was nowhere to be found.
Yes, ma'am. He disappeared after that. We don't know where he is.
Thank you, Your Honor. We passed the witness.
Any redirect?
Yes, brief redirect, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Diardi, did you have a way to pay off your gambling debt?
Well, certainly, ma'am. Like I said earlier, I had a little bit of debt, but I was paying it off on an installment plan with the money that I got every week from my job.
So were you at all in need of money?
No, ma'am, not in the slightest.
And was Whitecat being unusually underfed?
No, ma'am, not at all. The Whitecat knows when she's hungry, and sometimes she just didn't want to eat.
And did Whitecat eat on April 29th?
Yes, ma'am, she did.
And why did you send people away on April 30th to do their errands?
Well, ma'am, it's my job to assign errands to everyone. That's been my job for the past 2 years.
No further questions, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Anything further of this witness?
No recross necessary, Your Honor.
I ask that my witness be able to step down, and with that, the defense rests.
Okay. We will now hear some closing arguments from each of the parties. Everyone should please switch back to the speaker view. Also, since all witnesses have completed their testimonies, they should be off camera. There has been a request that at the end of the proceedings that everyone return to camera so that the judges may connect your names and faces. For those of you that are sharing a computer, if you could please let everyone know who is on the screen at the time. You may proceed with your closing arguments.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, counsel, and members of the jury. Sylvestris Diardi murdered Barry Bizarre to pay off gambling debt. For Diardi, murder was just another gamble. This one, she expected to win. We, the prosecution, do not take today's case lightly. We have the burden of proving to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Sylvestris Diardi killed Barry Bizarre. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence clearly proves our case. Without a body, some may have doubts that Barry Bizarre is actually dead. However, you've seen that whoever took out his boat was not Barry himself, and you've heard he would never leave the cats he was spiritually related to or his reincarnated wife. Furthermore, he's been presumed dead by the U.S. Coast Guard and a Texoma probate court. Mr. Bizarre didn't have any living family, and his spiritual beliefs may seem peculiar, but that doesn't make his death any less tragic. His friends, his colleagues, and our community here in Texoma are still mourning his loss. Having established he didn't leave on his own, we must consider who had the motive, ability, and opportunity to commit the murder. You have seen today that only Sylvestris Diardi fits the profile. Diardi's motive is crystal clear: money. Since late 2019, she has known that she stood to inherit Mr. Bizarre's estate if she was the main beneficiary in his will when he died. But everyone knew Mr. Bizarre changed his will frequently. You also heard about Diardi's gambling debt, which she owed to some wise guys. That debt, plus the fact that there were rumors flying about Mr. Bizarre changing his will, created an urgency for Diardi to cash in on the inheritance. The week of April 30th, the perfect opportunity begins to present itself. The Big Cat Temple is running low on cat food. A distant meat plant is shutting down and selling super cheap meat. Cameras are malfunctioning, including the ones facing the Y-Cat's cage. And it's almost Thursday. That whole week, Y-Cat had eaten very little food, but Diardi waited until Thursday to send her employees. That whole week, the cameras were malfunctioning, but again, Diardi waited until Thursday. The morning of Thursday, April 30th, Diardi gave all of her employees errands to run. Serval was sent to a camera store an hour and a half away instead of her local store. Kip Manul was sent on a 6 to 7 hour journey. By 7:30 that night, Sylvestris Diardi and Barry Bizarre were alone at the Big Cat Temple. Barry died in the tiger cage, and his body was fed to the Y-Cat. Wouldn't it be perfect karma if the Y-Cat ate Barry? Diardi fulfilled her own prophecy. Diardi stole Barry's boat and laid false flags, like texting Miserata and calling out to Chausnemeyer. Throughout today's trial, the evidence has proved one thing. Barry Bizarre died at the hands of Sylvestris Diardi. So in just a minute, when you're asked the question, on or about April 30th, 2020, did the defendant commit the offense of murder? You must answer yes and find Sylvestris Diardi guilty. Thank you.
Your Honor, permission to proceed with the defense closing.
Proceed.
May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. What really happened to Barry Bizarre? With no body, no eyewitnesses, and no murder weapon, can you really say beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime has even occurred? Now, the prosecution's detective believes that Sylvestris Diardi murdered Barry Bizarre by either knocking him out or locking him in the Y-Cat cage so the Y-Cat could kill him. Then, his body was either ground up or put on the boat. But which is it? This sounds more like a choose-your-own-ending novel, not a murder case. A Netflix film, not reality. Members of the jury, if the detective in this case has doubt, how can you not? My name is Paige Esri, and along with my co-counsels, Reese Donnelly and Liam Blank, we represent the defendant, Sylvestris Diardi. Today, the prosecution bears the burden of proof, which means they must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Sylvestris Diardi knowingly or intentionally caused the death of Barry Bizarre. If they have failed to do that, then you have no choice but to find my client not guilty. Members of the jury, let me remind you that beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest burden of proof in a court of law. Their proof must be of such a convincing character that you would not hesitate to rely and act upon it. But the prosecution has simply not met this burden today. Now, the evidence presented in court today shows that it is more likely that Barry Bizarre just sailed away and got caught in the typhoon than Sylvester Giardi killed him. Consider the facts. All the witnesses who knew Barry Bizarre personally, Chastamir, Kip Minol, Sylvester Giardi, and even the prosecution's own witnesses testified that Barry would often go on unannounced sailouts, sometimes for a few days and sometimes for at least a week. Mr. Giardi testified that Barry would not always even call to say he was out sailing. And on April 30th, the day that Mr. Bizarre disappeared, there was a typhoon. But as Chastamir testified, the typhoon was supposed to be far away from the marina. Even she didn't know that the path was going to change, especially since the marina was calm. And as the GPS pings revealed to Chastamir, Barry's boat was headed west, straight towards the new path of the typhoon. She testified that if Barry had been caught in the storm, he would not have survived. Next, the evidence presented today also shows it is more likely that Barry Bizarre was murdered by Serval Arata, who then framed Ms. Giardi. Consider the facts. Ms. Arata had a greater motive to get rid of Mr. Bizarre. Ms. Giardi had already saved Mr. Bizarre's life once before. Why would she want to kill him now, especially since they were like father-daughter? Chastamir testified that after Barry changed the will, Ms. Arata became obsessed with inheriting the sanctuary. Ms. Jacobus witnessed Ms. Arata shooting daggers at Ms. Giardi. And Ms. Arata even admitted that she was so hurt by the change in the will. She admitted that she was swimming in bills after her parents passed away. She needed Barry's money. But more importantly, she wanted revenge from Barry's betrayal. And on April 30th, Ms. Arata was sitting at Snoopy's pub, annoyed after being sent on her errand. Then at 9:30, she got a text from Ms. Giardi saying she was going out on a run. Suddenly, Ms. Arata saw an opportunity to get back what she deserved and frame Ms. Giardi. And so then she returned to the sanctuary, and Chastamir testifying to seeing Ms. Arata's sedan return at 9:45. And while Ms. Giardi was out on her run, Ms. Arata murdered Barry Bizarre and then took his boat out to get rid of the body. Then, because she was always checking on the boat, she knew that the tracking EPIRB was broken. And when the boat was 3 miles away from the marina, she returned to the shore on the dinghy. Then she went to the meat processing room to make it look like it had been used in order to frame Ms. Giardi. Ms. Giardi testified to hearing the machinery going off at 11:30, and that Ms. Arata's sedan was the only car left at the sanctuary. Members of the jury, the detective didn't find any human DNA on the meat processing machine because there was none. The detective only found traces of blood on the White Cat's cage because White Cat didn't kill Barry Bizarre. And the detective didn't find Barry Bizarre's body because he was lost at sea, either from the typhoon or because Ms. Arata killed him. With no body, no murder weapon, and no eyewitnesses, all that is left is a sea of reasonable doubt and circumstantial evidence that the prosecution has had to manipulate to invent their story. The prosecution has not met their burden of proof today, which is why you must find Sylvester Giardi not guilty of murder. Thank you.
Your Honor, as per the rules of mock trial, may I have up to 1 minute to rebut?
Yes.
That was reserved from my original closing statement.
You may continue.
Thank you. Your Honor, the defense has just said Serval Arata committed the murder. They have said she murdered Mr. Bizarre and framed Sylvester Giardi. However, this is solidly refuted by the fact that Ms. Arata believes Mr. Bizarre was about to make her the main beneficiary in his will. This plan involves Ms. Arata not only committing the murder, but a complex fraud. Wouldn't it be easier to just wait until she was the main beneficiary again? The defense also claimed that Mr. Bizarre just sailed away. However, you've seen this is so out of character for Mr. Bizarre, and that it is nearly impossible that he left. The fact that he could not have left, combined with the blood evidence and other forensic evidence, shows he must have been murdered. And if Ms. Arata didn't do it, the only other person with the motive, ability, and opportunity is Sylvester Giardi. So you must find her guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'll ask, does the prosecution allege that there are any rule violations? Did the prosecution hear me?
I apologize, Your Honor. We're here now.
Does the prosecution allege any rule violations?
No, Your Honor.
And does the defense allege any rule violations?
No, Your Honor, but if I had been allowed to object during closing statements, I would have objected facts not entered into evidence, as opposing counsel referenced that Arata thought that she was about to become the sanctuary when that statement was actually objected to and sustained and not allowed into the court today.
Thank you. Now, in an effort to make it easier for the judges, I would ask that each of the prosecution attorneys show themselves on camera and announce their name, please.
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Ella Levin.
My name is Sabina Wetterling.
My name is Catherine Collins.
And our witnesses are also at a computer. Would you like them to introduce themselves?
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Kyra Hong.
My name is Georgia Paula.
My name is Jonah Barnard.
And can you please restate who you, which witness you were?
Yes, I portrayed the witness Serval Arata.
I portrayed Sunday Leo.
I portrayed Pardalis Jacobitis.
Thank you. And can the defense do the same? Please turn your cameras on and identify yourselves for the judges.
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Paige Esri, and I'm a defense attorney.
Your Honor, my name is Reese Donnelly, and I'm also a defense attorney.
Your Honor, my name is Liam Blank, and I was also a defense attorney.
My name is Claire Baxter, and I portrayed Charles Namir.
Hi, Your Honor. My name is Katie Harris, and I portrayed Kent Manul.
My name is Avery Avila Dixon, and I portrayed Sylvester Diardi.
Thank you. At this time, the participants may leave the meeting, and all of the judges are to remain until we have submitted the ballots.
Thank you very much. You guys had a great round.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
We really appreciate your help.
Yes.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, there's still, one of them is
Yeah, let me move them
still
into
here.
the meeting room. I think they're probably not at those computers.
Okay.
And let me stop our live stream as well.